In this video, we'll talk about the circle of fifths and how it relates to minor scales, and we'll observe some of the correlations that pop up with the circle of fifths that deals with major scales. It is my belief that if you have a good understanding of the circle of fifths as it pertains to major scales, the circle of fifths that has minor scales shouldn't pose too much of a challenge. So let's review a little bit about the circle of fifths with major scales. Remember here that on the outside of the circle, what you have are the names of the major scales or keys represented by uppercase letters. At the top you have C, C major, which is a major scale that does not contain any accidentals. Each time you transpose a major scale up by a perfect fifth, starting on C major, you will need one additional sharp. That is the clockwise version of the circle of fifths. Each time you transpose a major scale down by a perfect fifth, starting on C major, you will need one additional flat. That is the counterclockwise version of the circle of fifths. On the inside of the circle, you have the names of the accidentals that are new to those scales or keys. Remember that a scale will have the accidental beside it in the circle of fifths, plus all of the preceding accidentals of the same kind all the way back to C major, right? So for instance, if we're looking here at A flat major, it appears here next to a D flat. That's the accidental that is new to A flat major, but A flat major utilizes D flat plus all of the preceding flats all the way back to C major. That is D flat, A flat, E flat, and B flat. Now take a look at the circle of fifths for minor scales. How is it different or similar from the circle of fifths that deals with major scales? Notice the convention of indicating minor scales or keys with lowercase letters on the outside here of the circle of fifths. This convention of using uppercase letters, as we saw previously, for major scales and major keys, and lowercase letters for minor scales and minor keys is applicable here in the circle of fifths and elsewhere in a lot of places in music theory. It's quite a conventional thing to do. Notice that at the top of the circle we have A minor, so it's not a C anymore, it's A minor because A minor is the minor scale that does not require any accidentals. The rest works the same way. Going clockwise means transposing the minor scale by ascending perfect fifths. Going counterclockwise means transposing the minor scale by descending perfect fifths. What about the inside here of the circle of fifths? The order of accidentals needed for these minor scales. If you notice, it's the same order and the same accidentals that we had before, right? Remember F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp. It's the same F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and so on. So basically, the circle of fifths works in the same way, the transpositions, and the accidentals are the same, and they happen in the same order. The process of transposing the minor scale, then, is the same as it was before. Transposition still means the same thing. It's applying a set of intervals, in this case, the whole tone semitone pattern of the scale, so that it begins at a different starting note, right? So if we do apply this whole tone semitone pattern, which we have seen previously, of the minor scale, so that it starts a perfect fifth above A minor, right? We're going to need to use an additional sharp. By the way, for the sake of review, we know what a perfect fifth is, but just so we can brush up on that definition, a perfect fifth is an interval that involves 5 letter names and 7 semitones, right? That's how I'm getting at E minor from A minor. A, B, C, D, E, I have 5 letter names there, and indeed between A and E I have 7 semitones, right? So we have the F sharp happening here. The pattern of whole tones and semitones is maintained because of that. Otherwise, if we had E and then an F natural, this would have been a semitone But here, the very first interval of the pattern is a whole tone, so we need to increase that distance by using that sharp over there. If we transpose the E minor to a perfect fifth up, an ascending perfect fifth, we end up with B minor. Once again, B to C would have been a semitone, right? If you look here at the piano layout, there's no black key in between B and C. So you need that sharp to increase that distance to a whole tone so that it obeys the pattern of whole tones and semitones of a minor scale, right? Each time we transpose then that minor scale up by a perfect fifth, we're going to need one more sharp than we needed previously. Here's B minor transposed up a perfect fifth to F sharp minor. Here we need 3 sharps instead of only 2. You keep doing that until we get to a scale in which all notes, all of the 7 scale degrees, have a sharp next to each other, which is A sharp minor. Here's how the clockwise semicircle, so to speak, of fifth looks like. These are the minor scales, only the minor scales that require sharp accidentals. Notice that the order of accidentals, once again, is the same as in the circle of fifths for major scales. That each new accidental is a perfect fifth above the previous accidental, right? So C sharp is a perfect fifth above F sharp. G sharp is a perfect fifth above C sharp. Just like the scales themselves. We're transposing the scales by ascending perfect fifths, and that's what's happening also with the new accidentals that pertain to that particular scale. We have already established that when we transpose minor scales down by a perfect fifth, starting on A minor, we're going to need an additional flat so that the new scale abides by that whole tone, semitone pattern we've been talking about, right, of the minor scale, which is this one. And here's how each of those 8 scales would look like. I start on A minor, transpose down by a perfect fifth. I have D minor. Now I need a flat, right? Between A and B natural, there would have been a whole tone, right? We can see here, A and B natural, there's a black key in between. So in order to remedy that, because we do need a semitone between those scale degrees 5 and 6, we have the need of adding a flat to that B. So it's A and then B flat. G minor, we're going to have the previous accidental that popped up, the B flat plus a new one, in this case, E flat. In C minor, we're going to need the previous accidentals, B flat, E flat, plus a new one, once again, between scale degrees 5 and 6. That is the A flat. Right? We keep doing that, transposing, and seeing that each time we transpose down by a perfect fifth, we need an additional flat until we get to the end of the line, A flat minor, where each of the 7 scale degrees receives a flat. Or in other words, all notes have flats. Notice here that the order of accidentals is the same, right, as in the major circle of fifths. This is the counterclockwise. These are the minor scales that utilize flats. So the accidentals and their order is the same. The way the circle works is the same as well. We're transposing down by a perfect fifth when we go counterclockwise. And here's the complete circle of fifths, right? Clockwise and counterclockwise, the minor scales that need sharps and the minor scales that need flats. And just like we had previously observed there in the major circle of fifths, here with the minor scales, we have these 3 bottom spots here of the circle of fifths that are occupied each by 2 different scales, one with flats and one with sharps. Right? These scales, when played, sound the same. They have different notes, but they sound the same. So G sharp minor and A flat minor sound the same. In fact, if I would play, it would sound like this. Right? And that sound is applicable both to A flat and G sharp minor. That's the same sound. Because they sound the same, but they're written with different notes and they have different names, they fit perfectly into our definition of enharmonic. So they are enharmonic scales or enharmonic keys, these 6 here at the bottom of the circle of fifths. However, we do have an additional thing to talk about here. Our discussion, if this were about major scales, our discussion of the circle of fifths would have ended in the previous slide. But because minor scales have 2 variants, right? The harmonic minor scale and the melodic minor scale, or also called the ascending melodic minor scale, we have to deal with those as well and explain a few things. Each of those 15 minor scales that you see here on the circle of fifths, they have their own harmonic and melodic variants. So as we saw before, the harmonic minor scale takes that natural minor scale and raises its 7th scale degree by a semitone, turning what was the subtonic, in this case in A minor G, into a leading tone, the G sharp. You'll remember that the difference between a subtonic and a leading tone is that the subtonic is a whole tone away from tonic, and the leading tone is but a semitone away from tonic. This raising, then, of the 7th scale degree increases the strong pull that scale degree 7 has towards the tonic, but it creates a problem in its wake. There's a gap between scale degree 6 and 7, as you can see here, of 3 semitones. This gap traditionally posed intonation problems, right? It was hard to play or sing in tune, and it wasn't very agreeable. It was kind of jarring to European ears of the 17th and the 18th centuries. So they concocted a new variant of the minor scale to address this issue of this big gap here. They wanted that gravitational pull of the leading tone in a minor scale, but this created a problem, 6 and 7 here, this big gap of 3 semitones. The melodic minor was the answer, and the melodic minor scale, what it does is that it raises both scale degrees 6 and 7, eliminating the big gap, right? Instead we have 2 whole tones instead of a semitone and then 3 semitones. We have 2 whole tones there, and we maintain the desired pull of the leading tone there. Because the melodic minor variant is often found in ascending gestures, it is also called, as I've mentioned previously, the ascending melodic minor scale. Here are some examples of minor scales we have already seen: A natural, A minor or A natural minor, G minor, and F sharp minor. And I've put here their harmonic and melodic variants side by side. So you can see how we are raising scale degree 7 in the harmonic minor and scale degrees 6 and 7 in the melodic minor. The point that is I want to make here that I think is of importance is that sometimes, even though we indicate the scale degrees, the raised scale degrees, with a sharp 7 or a sharp 6, that's not always what is going to happen in practice, because by raising notes that have flats, right, we're not going to put a sharp next to them, but a natural. So check this out. In G natural minor, we have G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F, and then back to G. So in the harmonic minor, all we have to do is raise that F by a semitone. We have an F sharp. So this is our scale: G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F sharp, G. Whereas in the melodic minor, we need to raise both scale degrees 6 and 7. So we know how to do that with 7, that takes a sharp, but with 6, we were not going to need an E sharp. That would be incorrect. That would be raising the scale degree 6 by 2 semitones, and we just needed to be raised by 1 semitone. So instead, what we do is we simply turn that E flat into an E natural. Remember from looking at a keyboard, right, that we have the E flat here on this key, and we make it E natural. Let's go back to that slide here. So I put it in parentheses, right, just so it is clear that this, in the previous versions of the minor scale, was an E flat. But in the melodic minor, it's an E natural. Here's how all of them sound. Here's G minor, the natural minor version. Right? And here's the G harmonic minor with that big gap between scale degrees 6 and 7. And finally, the melodic minor, or the ascending melodic minor version of G minor. Subtle differences, but that make, I think, a world of difference in actual music when you're playing or singing. And I've included F sharp natural minor here and their harmonic or its harmonic and melodic variants so that you see that we are using E sharp. This, for a lot of people that are beginning with music theory, is a little bit jarring or difficult to understand. Why not simply use an F? Why do I need, because if you look at the piano keyboard, you'll see that E sharp is played with the white key that is called F, right? So why not simply call that an F? And we've talked about this in a previous video in that we need each scale degree to have its own unique name, so we can't have two Fs in the F sharp minor scale. We have to have this as an E, and each scale degree must be a step away, right? So if we would have called this an F, we would have been skipping here letter names. We wouldn't have an E in this scale. We need an E in this scale in this position as the 7th scale degree. Right? So we need that E sharp. And here's how it looks with the F sharp melodic minor. If you would apply the harmonic and melodic minor scale variants to all minor scales, you would soon run into a problem when dealing with the scales on the right side of the circle of fifths, right? This side here. And the reason for that is because you're going to run into scales that already have sharps on scale degrees 7 and in scale degree 6. Let's take G sharp minor, for example. It has 5 sharps: F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. You can see it right here, right? And I've put here the numbers of the scale degrees in their order. So you can notice that scale degree 7 in G sharp natural minor is already an F sharp, right? So this is the subtonic here. What would happen to that subtonic if we turn the scale into G sharp harmonic minor? We would need to raise this F sharp by a semitone. If you'd consider the piano keyboard, you're looking at the F sharp here, you raise it by a semitone, you end up on G, right? That's that white key that is G. However, we cannot call the raised 7th scale degree G, because that violates those 2 rules that we just talked about in the case of major scales and minor scales. These 2 rules are: 1, each scale degree must have a unique letter name in the scale. If we call that raised 7th scale degree a G, then we have 2 Gs, a G natural and a G sharp, so that's a no-go. And the second rule is that each scale degree must be a step away from adjacent scale degrees. Or in other words, scale degrees can't skip letters, right? We have to have an F here in this position as scale degree 7. In the natural minor scale, that is an F sharp, right? So it must remain an F something in the harmonic minor scale. So the resolution to that problem is that we use double accidentals. A sharp raises a note by a semitone, a flat lowers a note by a semitone. So we need now to start talking about double sharps and double flats. A double sharp raises a note by 2 semitones, and a double flat lowers a note by 2 semitones. A double sharp looks like this, like an X, right? And a double flat, I think, is a little bit more straightforward. It's just 2 flats, one next to each other, 2 little B's. We never talk about double flats in the context of the harmonic and melodic minor scales, but we do see every now and then double sharps, right? So that F sharp here will be raised by a semitone. We would play that with a G key on the piano keyboard, for example, or you would apply a G fingering on your flute or oboe or clarinet, or you put your finger on the fretboard where the G would be, but we're not calling it a G. Actually, we're calling it an F double sharp for these two reasons that we have dealt with before, right? So the G sharp natural minor with the subtonic, with the F sharp, sounds like this. Whereas the G sharp harmonic minor with the F double sharp sounds like this. Okay, thanks for watching. In our next video, we'll talk about minor keys and minor key signatures, the concept of relative keys, how minor and major keys are related, and also a quick view of the complete circle of fifths.